Okay, that's go!
Hello honeys, today we'll be assigning 27 Aikatsu idols new fashion brands and giving them each 4 new outfits. At the end of this video, I'll also have instructions for how you can make your very own Aikatsu idol unit and get it shown off in a future video. Enjoy! Starting off with Ichigo, I switched out her original Angel Sugar brand for Aurora Fantasy. I wanted to see her in a slightly more elegant style. And then to make things extra fun, I also gave her pop, cool, and sexy brands. I went with Happy Rainbow to get a brighter core that suits Ichigo's bright personality. Then I picked Dance Fusion to lean into a higher energy, higher contrast look that's pretty far from Angel Sugar. And last we have Love Queen, since I really wanted to see her in Mizuki's original brand. For Aoi, I switched Featuring Girl with Swing Rock since we rarely get to see her in grungier, darker looks. I went the opposite direction with Dreamy Crown to explore a more grounded, preppy style for her. And we go even more grounded and playful with Magical Toy. These two still suit her intellectual, mischievous personality pretty well. To contrast these looks, I chose Sangria Rosa to get into a brighter, more elegant style that almost circles back around to Featuring Girl's palette. Ron had a lot of options since Sexy is the type with the most brands, and I switched Spicy Agaha with Dolly Devil since it's the modernized version of Spicy Agaha. I also picked Angel Sugar to try to push her way outside of her typical style, and Retro Clover to get an even higher level of contrast with her other looks. Dance Fusion is closer in tone to Spicy Agaha's palette, which I think rounds out her outfits with a more familiar aesthetic. Hikari is also a Spicy Agaha user in the DCD game, so I included her as well. I gave her Love Moonrise since we don't get to see her in any Season 2 performances, and I think she'd like Mizuki's style. I kept to a more mature vibe in giving her Vivid Kiss, then pushed her into more conceptual territory with Featuring Girl. I got even further out there with Aurora Fantasy, but I think a more delicate style does work really well for her. For Aome, leveling up Happy Rainbow to Mecha Panic felt like a clear choice. It's a softer color palette, but has more experimental prints and motifs. Dreamy Crown pushes her into a bolder color palette without sacrificing her cuteness. That sacrifice happens when I give her Loli Gothic to stretch her stylistic range as far as possible. In comparison, I think Sakura Irokaden ends up being more of a middle ground between Otome's cuteness and a mature aesthetic. Shion ended up with a lot of experimentation after I switched Featuring Girl with Dance Fusion. I wanted to see her in more colors, so I went with Retro Clover for a pop brand. The mod style just works too well with her haircut. I gave her Dreamy Crown for the same intellectual vibe as Aoi, and then tried to push her farther with Spicy Agaha without deviating too far from what I think her comfort zone would be. Sakura had Aurora Fantasy switched with Dreamy Crown to see how she'd do with a more structured aesthetic. Swing Rock ended up being the strongest contrast to that preppy style. For her pop brand, I'd seen Sakura in a lot of Happy Rainbow already, so I chose Mecha Panic instead. Her pink hair ended up being a great fit for the pastel color palette. And then because of her ties to Mizuki, I gave her Love Moonrise. I leaned into Yurika's love of rock music and swapping Loli Gothic for Swing Rock, but it didn't end up being a huge departure from her usual style, so I went the opposite direction with Angel Sugar. I gave her Magical Toy to match Kaide, and Dolly Devil I mostly chose for the name. I almost ended up with all of her cores being Devil or Halloween themed, but that would have felt a little too on the nose. Kaide had Magical Toy switch with Vivid Kiss because I wanted to explore the more youthful side of the Vivid Kiss brand, and Kaide fits that aesthetic well. Of all the Aikatsu cast, I think she'd be the most likely to enjoy Bohemian Sky, so I gave her one of its better coords. Then I pushed her really far with a more mature Featuring Girl coord, and brought things back around with a super soft Angel Sugar look. I knew that I wanted to switch Mizuki's Love Queen / Moonrise brands with Sangria Rosa because it has the perfect Queen of Hearts coord for her. I chose Aurora Fantasy because she's already been in so much Angel Sugar, and Dreamy Crown seemed too close to her usual color palette. I thought Loli Gothic and Happy Rainbow would be two interesting styles to push her into, but they ended up fitting her better than I expected. For Mikuru, I swapped Vivid Kiss with Magical Toy to find a more whimsical look for her without losing her bright and bold aesthetic. Dolly Devil seemed like a natural fit, maybe because she has a similar hair color and style to Nono. I tried pulling her in an edgier direction with Swing Rock, and then similar to Hikari, I wanted to contrast that harshness with Aurora Fantasy's more delicate motifs. Sora was a challenge because her personality and design are so tied to Swing Rock, but I gave her Featuring Girl to test how flexible her stylistic range could get. I gave her Magical Toy to match Ki, and that ended up working really well for her. Then I tried to give her Angel Sugar to match Ichigo, and her hair color was difficult to find a good match for. I chose Sakura Irokata because of the traditional versus rebellious contrast, and that ended up being one of my favorite looks for her. Ki was a little easier. I switched Magical Toy for a Mecha Panic, and the pastels still look great on her. I ended up going for really similar palettes between Aurora Fantasy and Love Moonrise, even though I originally wanted to push her farther outside of her existing chords. I gave her Swing Rock to match Sarah, and finally found something that was a stronger contrast to her other looks. Maria was a surprise because she looks good in a lot of brands, and after I switched to Aurora Fantasy with Dreamy Crown, it was hard to narrow down a chord for her. White Sky Veil was a close second option. I thought Lily Gothic would be a stretch for her, but she looks right at home. Same with Retro Clover and Love Moonrise, which I thought would at least give her a bigger range in motifs to explore. For Sora, it was also hard to pick a brand to replace Bohemian Sky since there are so many options. I went with Spicy Agata to match Ron, and tried not to pick a chord she'd already been given in official art. Angel Sugar's pastels seemed like they'd be a challenge for her design, but I was pleased with how many options she had there too. I chose Mecha Panic for the same reason, and I liked the more eccentric style even more on her. Featuring Girl was a big surprise to me though. I think Crystal Aquarius really suits her. Noel is an Angel Sugar user in Aikatsu on Parade's web series, so I included her too. I gave her one of my all-time favorite Aurora Fantasy chords, mostly because I hadn't found anyone else to give it to yet. I gave her Swing Rock to match Sarah, which ended up being a good contrast. Then I picked Dolly Devil for a slightly more youthful take on the sexy type, and found a soft corner of the Vivid Kiss brand to round out the pop side of her style. Aari is an amazing fit for Aurora Fantasy's Aries collection, so I already knew I wanted to switch out Dreamy Crown for it. I ended up pushing her in a lot of different directions, starting with the more luxurious style of Love Queen. Then I went super bright with Happy Rainbow, and super dark with Lily Gothic. There's so much variety in these chords, but I think they all fit her super well. Sumire also has a lot of versatility. I swapped Lily Gothic with Swing Rock to see her in something louder and grungier, and then pushed for a darker, more elegant palette with Love Moonrise. Then I went for Dreamy Crown, partly to match Aari, but mostly to try a preppier style. I couldn't resist giving her a fluffier chord though. I gave her Vivid Kiss to match Hina and round out the trio, which gives her some nice variety in her overall palette. Luminus turned out to be a very stylistically diverse group. Even when I switched Hinaki's Vivid Kiss brand for Retro Clover, I still think she blends in perfectly. She has Sangria Rosa to match Jury, and even the more mature style still looked great on her. Dance Fusion fit in with some of the darker Vivid Kiss chords, so it adds contrast to her looks without being too far outside of her usual style. Angel Sugar is the biggest stretch, but even a big frilly dress looks great on her. I ended up switching Jury's Sangria Rosa brand for Bohemian Sky because I thought an earthier style would be interesting to explore with her. I gave her Vivid Kiss to match Hinaki, of course, but it was a bit difficult to match her color palette. Her hair color in particular was a challenge for Dance Fusion too, but I think I found something that works fine. I think Angel Sugar works surprisingly well. There are a lot of saturated colors that look nice on her. Miyabi's swap might be surprising, but I went very bold in swapping Sakura Irokata with Sangria Rosa. It pushed her style in a really bold direction without venturing too far outside of her usual motifs. I had her match Sakura and using Aurora Fantasy, and really wanted to take the opportunity to give her a chord with shorts. I avoided giving her Retro Clover though, since she wears it so much already, and picked Mecha Panic instead. I kept to her usual purples to try to make it less jarring. For Featuring Girl though, I really wanted the traditional versus futuristic contrast, so I put her in a very different style of chord. Cocon was a lot of fun. I switched Retro Clover for Happy Rainbow and gave her another one of my favorite chords. Her personality suits Dolly Devil really well, so I tried that next, but her hair color was once again very challenging to match. I thought Lily Gothic would also be a stretch, but I actually really liked the more formal trouser look on her. I rounded off her looks with Dreamy Crown to find a more retro preppy chord that leans into a softer color palette. I expected Madoka to be easier style, but her range is similar to Ki in being a little more specific. I decided to swap Angel Sugar to Dreamy Crown to match Aari, and then went for Featuring Girl to get her farther out of her comfort zone. I think that was a little more successful when I gave her Spicy Agata though. Happy Rainbow was surprisingly difficult to fit her into, so I found a pink and fluffy chord that's closer to her usual style. Rin was actually the more versatile one out of the pair, and I had no problem switching Dance Fusion for Swing Rock for her. Even when I gave her Angel Sugar to match Madoka, she still had a lot of options. I went with Sakura Irokata because of the traditional contrast, but that worked out great too. And Vivid Kiss was practically a no-brainer. It was hard to pick only one chord for her, and Pure Adventure fits her personality perfectly. Nono has a similar look to Mikuru, so after I switched Dolly Devil for Spicy Agaha, I tried to go in a more youthful direction for her. I picked Aurora Fantasy for her too, but chose a cuter coord. And when I picked Future and Girl, I looked for a more experimental silhouette. I ended up giving her Vivid Kiss to test the style differences further and found that Nono does even better with a brighter color palette. Lisa is also a Dolly Devil user, but I gave her Sangria Rosa for a slightly more conceptual style. I ended up sticking with purples for her even in Retro Clover and couldn't quite escape that palette in Lily Gothic either. I finally found something brighter and bolder in Dreamy Crown, but I think the preppy, elegant direction stayed pretty consistent for her. I got to push Nina farther than I expected, starting with switching Mecha Panic for Magical Toy. It's a pretty crazy coord, but it works for her original style well. I knew Angel Sugar also had a perfect campy macaron dress for her, so I had to make that her cute brand. I thought Dance Fusion would be a big stretch, but surprisingly I think the darker colors are fine as long as the overall design is youthful. I tested the opposite logic with Love Queen, where I think more elegant pieces are fine as long as the color palette is closer to her hair color. Hey, did you want to make your own Aikatsu idol unit and get it shown off in a video? If so, just include a list of your dream idol unit members in the comments below by July 31st, 2024. They can be from any Aikatsu series and have as many members as you want. Feel free to include a group name, coords, or any other details you can think of. There are no limits on how many you can submit. Let me know which brands you would give your favorite characters in the comments below, and look out for my Constellation intro ranking next week. Bye bye!
Galaxy! Amazing! It's tomato juice!